Hello, I'm Lord Stockton. I'm helping to organise and fronting David Amess's virtual book tour. Great deal more comfortable than real book tours, which as a publisher I know all about. David is a wonderful man, and he is the living embodiment of what is good about politics and Parliament. David went into politics not because he wanted to become rich or famous or even notorious, but because he wanted to help people. And he believed that the best way he could help them was to be their representative on the council, in the constituency, and in the nation at large. He has always done this with only the very best intentions. As a result, he is admired and is a friend of almost everyone, even the civil servants who he badgers endlessly about Southend becoming a city. They admire him, albeit a little ruefully. I don't think that there's anyone in politics today who is as straightforward and as honourable as David is. Finally, I think all I can say is that I am very fond of David, and I'm very proud to be able to call him my friend.
Next month, a book which I have written called Eyes and Ears, A Survivor's Guide to Westminster, will be published, part of which covers Brexit. And yes, by inference, everyone will be in the book. Would my right honourable friend agree with me that the last general election was not fought on how political parties might handle the coronavirus pandemic, but was categorically about ensuring that the result of the 2016 referendum was implemented in full? Will my right honourable friend confirm that that is what he intends to see happen?
Prime Minister. I can indeed, Mr. Speaker, and I congratulate my right honourable friend on his new book.
And if you were to read his excellent book, Madam Deputy Speaker, Eyes and Ears, probably available in all good bookshops, you would be aware that he is the proud patron of the Conservative Animal Welfare Foundation and has devoted much of his life to campaigning on behalf of our furry friends.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to my virtual book tour event. If you would like to ask me any questions during this premiere, please use the live chat box on the screen and I will do my best to answer your question. If you would like to purchase my book and support one of the 3 charities I'm raising money for with the sales, there are links in the description to Ian Dale's Politicos or Amazon. You can also get the book directly from the publishers, Luath Press, or through your own Member of Parliament, who I'm sure will be more than happy to collect a copy from my office at the House of Commons. I hope you enjoy the evening. Well, hello everyone. And today I'm being interviewed by 2 of my colleagues, Angela Richardson, who represents the great seat of Guildford, and Peter Bone, who represents, tell us, Peter, is it Wellingborough?
It's Wellingborough and Rushden.
Okay. Well, I really think these are 2 great colleagues, very, very different, who've got much to share with the audience. But look, less about them, ladies and gentlemen, something about me. I've written a book, and here it is. Eyes and Ears, A Survivor's Guide to Westminster. It's not strictly an autobiography. If I had wanted to speak frankly about colleagues, it might have been a bestseller, but I would need armed protection as I walk about the parliamentary estate if I told it like it is. But there's a little section, tongue-in-cheek, where colleagues might think, oh, I fit into that category. But it's a book really about nearly 4 decades experience in Westminster, and it talks about Brexit and the coronavirus pandemic. So, Angela, would you tell us something about yourself, please?
Oh, well, thank you very much, Sir David. It's very kind of you to invite both of us along today to have a discussion about your fantastic book, which I have been enjoying reading very much. I'm originally from New Zealand, so I spent the first 24 years of my life growing up on 11,000 miles away on the other side of the world. Had no thought of entering politics, decided I didn't go to university. I went straight into the world of investment banking, starting right at the beginning, right at the bottom, sorry, of the ladder, as an office junior in the settlements department, and sort of rose up through the ranks rather quickly. And had exposure to lots of different financial instruments, which was very interesting and exciting, and that was in the 1990s. Lived through the Baring scandal with Mr. Leeson, Nick Leeson, I think his name was, if I'm remembering correctly. It's so many decades ago now. But as all young New Zealanders like to do, because we're so geographically isolated, I got on an aeroplane and came over to the UK on a 2-year working visa, worked in the City of London, and had the great fortune of meeting my husband at work, who is a lovely Englishman. We've been married for 20 years and we have 3 teenage children. So involved in politics now, have been since 2016. It was Brexit that drew me into the political discussion and debate, and just really enjoyed going out and campaigning and speaking to people on the doorstep. So that's a little bit about me, and found myself in December 2019 elected the Member of Parliament for Guildford.
Well, we are so blessed, Angela, to have you. I don't know if you're aware, Angela, but before I became an MP, I used to own a recruitment agency. And Peter will smile at this, where we recruited accountants. And this is a long time ago. Our lifeblood was South Africans, Australians, and New Zealanders. And forgive me for saying this, New Zealanders didn't like being mistaken for Australians.
You're absolutely right.
But I can tell the difference between accents. I mean, in this day and age, you couldn't, if you were an employer, say, I'd like an Australian or like a New Zealander. But the New Zealanders were greatly sought after. But I want to put you in an embarrassing situation, Angela. The Olympic Games are going on. And New Zealand are doing pretty well, not only in rugby. Do you find yourself torn?
So when the All Blacks are playing, so not the Olympics, but when the All Blacks are playing, I'm very neutral on it, and I say, may the best team win. But it is, it's an incredibly difficult game to watch with the rugby. But in most other sports, I'm able to fully get behind the national team here.
You see, Peter, Angela's so much nicer than you and I. You heard her say, may the best team win. I don't see it like that. If UK is the worst team, I still want them to win. Now, Peter, you and I have known one another for a long time, but I still would like you to tell the viewers about your good self.
Well, I'm a chartered accountant by profession, but my spiritual home is Westminster. That's where I moved to in my teens, and one day I was walking along Kenilworth Drive and I met a Conservative team out canvassing, and I was already very much into politics, and I joined South and West Conservative Association. And over the years I became a councillor in Southend, when it was a county borough, in fact, and which was the best unit of local authority. And then I became deputy chairman of the association, and I also was Paul Channon's media handler, which was somewhat difficult with Paul because he didn't really want to do any media. But of course, what I should be doing now, you should be interviewing me, because I should be the Member of Parliament for Southend West. What David may not know is that when he got selected in for the 1992 election, I was also being considered to be the Member of Parliament at that time as the candidate. And it was in Ivor Hall, and I was sitting in a little box room waiting to go on next. And this chap before me had them all roaring with laughter. And I said, oh my God, I've got to go in there after that. But some candidate has gone and got them all happy about him. And of course, that was you. And I'm very pleased you went on to take Southend West in a very difficult election. And well, it wasn't actually as difficult as 97, but it was a difficult election in 92. And I had the pleasure of instead fighting Neil Kinnock actually, have I got that wrong, David? Did you get in? Was it 97 you got in?
Peter, when I'm lowered into the grave, the only thing I will be remembered for is the 92 election when I was the MP for Basildon.
That's right. Actually, I got that wrong. You were Mr. Basildon, weren't you?
I was.
Yeah.
Never forgiven by the people of Southend who thought they were much, much posher than Basildon. Yeah. It was 97.
That's right, because I'd fought Kinnock in 92 and had the best Conservative result ever. I only lost by 36,000 votes, and that actually is the best Conservative ever. But no, it was 97. That's right. And it was 97. You got selected for Southend West, wasn't it?
Yeah, and Angela, you'll be interested to know the final was between myself and Eleanor Lang.
Yes, I read that in your book.
Yeah, in those days, you didn't have any of these daft open primaries. Forgive me if you were chosen from one. Yeah, daft things. It was, Peter, the final selection was held at Belfair School. Oh. And I said to my wife, crikey, there's someone directing the traffic into the playground. That's how many people actually turned up for the selection. But yeah, I mean, Peter, you are much talked about and much loved still in Westcliff-on-Sea. And you are a proud Westcliffian. And again, Angela wouldn't realise all the other people, and this is extraordinary, who became parliamentarians and went to, because we've got 4 local grammar schools, went to the 2 Westcliffs, became Labour MPs or Labour peers. And it's only Peter who became a Conservative. But anyway, who would like to ask me the first question about my book?
Well, I'm not going to be backwards about coming forward. I was quite struck about you talking about your campaigning that you did many years ago, and having only fought one general election myself, and it being a target seat and having a little bit of influence from the centre going on. I was quite struck by the difference between campaigning when you first started out, David, and what I did in 2019 and in 2017 when I helped my predecessor. Obviously, there's been quite a big shift to social media, but we need boots on the ground still, and we still need to be talking to constituents and knocking doors. So I'd be really interested to just hear about your different experiences and some of the things that you think have worked really well for you, that perhaps newer MPs like me ought to keep in our toolkit.
Yeah. Angela, our party was known to have the greatest fighting machine in the world. And when we were at 32 Smith Square, it was just fabulous. And looking back on it all, once we left there, as you know, Labour went into the Tower Block, we went into Victoria, everything changed. And I don't think it was just about volunteering, but we suddenly decided we couldn't have young Conservatives. We had to rebrand young people. That we couldn't have the women's group. We had to rebrand them. Well, I know things have to change, but I, having been a member of the Conservative Party now for over 50 years, we lost a lot of people who sort of took offence at it, and we haven't really managed to replace them. And Angela, we've just fought 2 by-elections, one in Chesham and Amersham, and one in Batley and Spen. And I went to
3, Hartlepool as well.
Oh, crikey, Hartlepool. Well, I didn't go to Hartlepool, but I went to the other 2. Hartlepool, we won. I'm thrilled about that. But I do think my quick visit to those 2 by-elections, we need to revisit our expertise. So this is what the way I see it. At the end of the day, it's down to the candidate. So the candidate has got to lead by example. And given that all those years ago, I had no councillors at district or county level in Basildon, it was just me, given that the local council hated me, and I'm serious, and given that the chief officers were all Labour, I thought, well, I'm not going to have this. I've got no money to fight the campaign. I've got no professional agent. I asked a cousin of mine who I didn't realise was going through a breakdown at the time. And by the end of the bloody election, we both nearly had a breakdown. But, you know, I believe in things. I know I am a conservative. And that's why, fast forwarding it to 2021, thrilled about Brexit, but we can't just be about Brexit. We now need a vision, really, of what we want to do with our country and our place in the world. So I think there is no substitute, Angela, and there never will be, for personal contact between the candidate and the electorate. We can't do it all on Zoom. We can't do it all in emails, etc. You need the eye contact and you need to keep door knocking, frankly. So even though I hated that election on the 12th of December 2019, because it got dark at 4 o'clock, I was cold, I was fed up looking at people's Christmas decorations, I hated it. David Amos knocked on doors, 10 to 12, 2 to 4, and yes, 6 to 8. Which sort of gives you a bit of time to recover. And I just keep going round and round the wards. And going back to the days in Basildon, Angela, I was doing the step ladder thing. He called it the soapbox before John Major ever thought of that. I got a little set of step ladders with a board in front of it, a megaphone in the town centre, and told them about my vision. So I think the enthusiasm of the candidate makes a great deal of difference. And when you get elected, okay, people just want a career now, but put your constituents first and do your constituency stuff. And then I think the rest of it will follow. I was very confused in the by-election about the way we were sort of targeting people and who was, you know, you can't read a script out in front of people on a doorstep and tick it off. People aren't like that, you know. It's a quick, instantaneous, and you've got to make sure that the team are canvassed. So I suppose what I'm saying, Angela, don't expect others to do it for you. It's all from yourself. You lead by example. And then if you're really enthusiastic, your team will grow. And yes, I don't buy the American thing with all sort of balloons and all the rest of it, but let's have a bit of razzmatazz. So my campaign signature tune, which I'm not going to sing, has been with me from the very first day I started, and it sounds like an ice cream tune. Now, what do you think, Peter?
Well, I agree with you, David, immensely about the campaigning. It's very much more difficult when there's a by-election for the candidates to have their say because they're controlled by central office. And the reason we're losing by-elections is because we're not knocking on door and finding out how people are going to vote and then turning those people out. But what you've missed, David, and probably because you were being modest, is the fact that you were Mr. Basildon and you're certainly now Mr. Southend West. And it's you are a tremendous parliamentarian and all that. But what the people of Southend West know about is you're just a terrific constituency MP. The amount of time you spent in the constituency doing events and meeting people and listening to their concerns is enormous. And I can testify that personally because I have relatives who still live in Southend, and you helped one of them out when it was a very, very desperate time. And without your intervention, I don't think the problem would have been sorted out. And you're renowned for that. And that's why, of course, you have so much support. So you're absolutely right about the campaigning, but it's what you do as a member of parliament locally. I can't think of an MP who does it better than you.
Peter, you're too kind and generous. I do thank you for that. But I suppose mean, why do you go into politics, Angela and Peter, unless you like people and you want to make a difference and try and help them? And you don't get, Peter, huge publicity for it, but it's making the phone call, writing the letter, the visit, the little handwritten note if someone dies. You know, all these little things I think count, because, you know, show me a happy family. Andrew, it's wonderful you've got 3 children and you, for 20 years, you've got this Brit that you've fallen in love with, but, you know, life is tough for us all, really. The Hollywood dream doesn't entirely exist, really. And I recognise and feel for people and our own colleagues, who the general public are hard to judge, because you can feel, well, I do feel for people. So thank you, Peter, for your kind remarks. It's in my DNA. Now, Peter, what would you like to ask me about my book?
Well, I don't know whether your book covers the, as much as perhaps it might, the Brexit debate, and how you were very involved in that, and the support for leaving. Now, the Conservative Party, we are now the Brexit Party. We now believe in leaving the European Union. But when that whole referendum campaign started out, people had to be brave to support Brexit, and you were. And I remember that I'd set up a grassroots out with Tom Purslow, my colleague, our colleague, and we were the alternate Leave campaign. We were effectively, actually, most cross-party, because we would take anyone who believed in leaving the EU could become part of grassroots out. And we set about having a nationwide tour, and I think we did 3 events every day. But the very first event was with you, David, in Westminster. But I've still got a sort of mug here, and I just wondered what you felt in relation to the fact that we had, you know, David Cameron and George Osborne, who were Remainers, and basically saying to people, if you wanted a political career in government, you had to, even if you believed in Leave, you had to come out for Remain. And I don't know whether you felt, I mean, I think, you know, that was one of the problems at the time, wasn't it? And how did you go about dealing with that?
Well, Peter, I want to, this is like a Angela mutual admiration thing. I love the way Peter's advertising the Go mug. I've got the bits and pieces. I think, Peter, that when I look back on the Brexit debate, full stop, I go back to when I was first elected and Ted Heath was still a member, the father of the house. And I'm sorry, Angela, I could never forgive Ted. I mean, Ted, I know he's long since gone. He was a really cold fish, frankly, not a people person, but he was absolutely obsessed with our membership of the European Union. And when I look back on it, Angela, I think that when de Gaulle said no to Macmillan, if we'd have joined at the outset, things would have been so different. And I think we let New Zealand down, South Africa down, Australia down. And I felt very, very strongly about the whole thing. But of course, Ted wouldn't discuss the thing, and he fell out badly, so badly with Margaret about the whole thing. And then, of course, fast forward in it, Peter, looking to our more recent leaders, unless you were in love with our membership of the European Union, your sort of face didn't fit. But I suppose, look, history is going to judge us all, and the jury is still out on David Cameron and George Osborne. But I speak as I find. I didn't want to go into the coalition. No. They were great parliamentarians, but it was wrong, Peter, with what they did, I feel, in terms of using the civil service machinery to push the message. And you and Tom, you came to my office, sold us on the deal. My God, you were so brave. And we all know that people colleagues are very two-faced, so they laugh behind your back, you know. But Bill Cash, my God, he's been keep going and going and going on the issue. And then a little later, you did the same. And you always managed to put it into a speech. And you had the, I think, the feeling of the British people, that they wanted to be given an opportunity. Peter, I never thought we would be given that opportunity again. So I will always thank David Cameron for giving us that opportunity. Obviously, he didn't think the election was going to go like that. And yes, I think that a number of people's careers were stymied because they weren't, you know, Margaret would say one of us, well, they would say one of them, and I certainly wasn't part of the set. But Peter, thank you and your team for what you did. I much regret that you weren't successful in being the team that were chosen, but you took it to the wire, and I know it must have been very, very stressful, very, very difficult with other colleagues, but you stuck to your guns. And Angela, they were all proved right. I didn't think we were going to win that referendum, Peter. I really didn't. You know,
but David, on that, you know, that first morning of our 3-week or 4-week tour of the United Kingdom, we turned up on the green outside, well, it would have been Chalkwell Station.
Yeah.
And there was you and me and Tom, and we would have thought, you know, you might get a handful of people. I mean, it was in the open air, goodness gracious. As you say, the stepladder and the box and the soap, you know, the sort of soap way of doing it. And yet we had 50, 60, 70 people there. That was just an amazing start. I mean, what you might not know is my office has got no idea about geography, because the afternoon one was in Kent, which is fine. The evening one was in Cornwall. So that was that.
Wow.
But you set us off so well on that campaign, and it shows a testimony that so many people turned up at very short notice because you'd put that on.
Jacob Rees-Mogg was great.
Yes, I mean we had Jacob, didn't we? Gosh, did we come back? We came back again, didn't we?
Yeah,
we had Jacob in Ivor Hall, didn't we? Later on,
you had him as a star attraction, and he was great.
And he absolutely packed the audience, and all the roads around the Conservative office were blocked, from what I remember. I had to park in Kilburn Park. Yeah. So
you see, Angela, we really do have so much to thank the likes of Peter for. You know, he was very, very brave. He was treated as an outcast. I mean, my voice isn't great to listen to. Peter's got a very good broadcasting voice with his dulcet tones, and the House does listen. But I think he sort of paid a big, big price for his bravery. In Guildford, then, Angela, how did the Brexit debate play?
So it was obviously quite complicated because it was a Remain voting constituency in the end. And that continued and played out through 2017 general election, where we saw my predecessor's majority, you know, squeezed, probably because of the referendum result. And then, you know, it's now a very marginal constituency. And probably one of the questions that I was going to ask you is, we've left the European Union. We've come out the other side of the transition period, but we've had COVID to contend with. And a lot of people are asking now, well, how do we know whether Brexit has been successful or not? And will we as parliamentarians spend the next 3 years still continually having to make the case for Brexit and why it was the right thing for this country? So I'm kind of interested in, we've got the history of Brexit, and you talk about it quite a lot in your book. And I think the diary entries at the end of your book, I would recommend everybody to read, because it's fascinating. And sort of a supplementary question is, do you write a diary every day? And when did you start writing the diary? Did you start writing it straight away, or did you start a wee way into your parliamentary career? But I would be interested in, you know, hearing from both of you, I suppose, as to how you see the next couple of years going between now and the next general election, and do you think Brexit will feature much?
Right, Angela, I do not write a diary every day, but it's stored in my head, and I do remember everything, and I do hold grudges, although you wouldn't recognise it, but you name it, I remember it. And the point about the book, Angela, you see, I never expected to be elected in 1983. 144th Labour seat that could be won, and no one covered it at all. So do you think did I think I'd still be an MP now? No. So I was writing a book more or less from the time that I became an MP. My then secretary on an old-fashioned golf ball typewriter plodded away at the book, and it's been rewritten so many times. And it was fairly recently, because that Parliament, it was so unpleasant. The Brexit Parliament, really, really unpleasant between colleagues, nasty. And I feel sorry for your intake, Angela, because you've not had a good introduction to Parliament. We haven't really got to know each other in the way we have. But to answer your question directly, I have no doubts at all about Brexit, that was the right decision. Let's start with the number one thing, which conveniently is glossed over. If we'd have signed up to the European vaccination programme, we would have been sunk. Thank God we weren't in it. And secondly, okay, we'll have to see how well the economy is doing, because it's very good and easy to be giving away money all the time. But I judge it by people like Geoffrey Howe, Nigel Lawson, when you have to balance a book. So we're going to see how that is going. But I think the state of our economy, because we left the European Union, is far better than we would if it would have still been us as a member of the European Union. And from what I can make out, I mean, hopefully, Angela, when we get back in autumn with a proper functioning Parliament, ministers properly held to account, which they're not really at the moment, and the opposition haven't sort of played it, I think, as well as that they could, then we'll find out how well we're doing. But all the economic indicators are telling me that we're doing so well, and these trade deals, they keep coming and coming and coming. And I think we have got the edge. But look, Angela, before Peter responds, I owe everything to Margaret Thatcher, the greatest leader in my lifetime. And I was so blessed to be with her for 2 terms when she was at the peak of our powers. We punched above our weight. I want the UK to do that again. But at the moment, I cannot judge what our relationship is like with the United States of America after Brexit. I can't judge how we're doing with China and how China's role in the pandemic has played out. You know, was it through bats in markets being sold for food, or in that scientific situation, you know, where it all started? And I can't judge about Russia. But everything tells me that already we've got a big bonus from leaving the European Union. How do you see it, Peter?
Well, absolutely. I mean, the vaccination program is just an example, isn't it? Taking back control allowed us to do that, and financially we're better off. And I don't think, as Angela, I don't think we will be talking about Brexit in the future. I mean, we've been talking about COVID for the last goodness knows. I mean, when Brexit was happening and gone through, I was beginning to think, well, there'll be nothing that will dominate politics in the coming year. And then, of course, COVID came around and it dominated even more than Brexit. So I don't think that will be the issue. But I do feel, as David said, that your intake has missed Parliament. I mean, you came in, you got there for about a month, and then it was COVID. And it just, I mean, I think it will be, the autumn looks to be the exciting time, because Parliament isn't working at the moment, and as David rightly says, we're not holding the government to account properly. That's not actually the fault of the government. It's just a way, without members in the chamber, members leaping to their feet when they suddenly realise there's an intervention to be made. When it's all pre-programmed, it just doesn't work.
No, I agree. So, Peter, ask me about restoration and renewal.
Okay. Well, I will. I will ask you about that, David, but I was particularly interested in, I think there's a section in the book called The Slow Death of Parliament. And we're not actually talking about the building there. We're talking about this move to a presidential system of government, I think. And so I'd like your view on where, you know, will Angela ever actually be part of a working parliament, or will we be something looking at, you know, are we going to become the equivalent to the House of Representatives? You must have seen a lot of changes over the years you've been in Parliament.
Oh, I have, Peter. And Angela, the changes aren't for the better. Yeah, I'm going to say I love the building. I do love the Palace of Westminster. And I entirely accept that there are all sorts of really, really urgent works that need to be done, starting with fire safety in the sewers and all of that. But the idea that we should move out for 10 years is a non-starter. We will never return. And I think the mad idea of going to 79 Whitehall, this is just crazy. Never mind about the security. But Peter and Angela, I think the present speaker is doing the right thing at the moment. I think slowly but surely there is a plan. The works are progressing without us moving out. And I'm pretty optimistic that that will prevail. And if anyone leaves, it's going to be the House of Lords, the unelected people, rather than the House of Commons. But the way,
David, I'm right in thinking that when the Commons was bombed, didn't the MPs move to the Lords then, and it was the Lords that left the site? Yeah. You think that might be a?
I do, and also Church House was used as well. No, the unelected. Look, there are far too many members of the House of Lords. I've got many friends in the House of Lords, but to be up to over 800 is absolutely ridiculous. They don't have constituents, and I think we need to, Angela, stay in Westminster. So I'm glad that the Northern Estate, they're working on that at the moment. Big Ben, the repairs are progressing with that, so I'm optimistic about it. But the way the place have changed is beyond all belief. And I think, Peter and Angela, it did change from the moment we televised our proceedings. So my maiden speech, relief to all you viewers, you can't watch it on video because it wasn't being televised. It was on an old-fashioned tape. And the standard of oratory then, it was absolutely marvellous. I mean, if you heard Ian Gow speak, Enoch Powell speak, not the present Mr. Ben, but Tony Ben speak at the top of his game, Michael Foot, Shirley Williams, the list is endless. Michael Heseltine, a wonderful orator. But of course, it was all about without televising. As soon as we televised our proceedings, and the TV monitor came into our rooms, well, that was it. You didn't have to go to the chamber to see it anymore. And that has spoilt the atmosphere. Yeah, I am going to say it. PM's questions now is absolute rubbish. What is the point of it? I'm sorry, I know you put in regularly, Pete, and I'm not being patronising, you perform well, but when we had it for 15 minutes on a Tuesday and on a Thursday, it was much more up to date. The atmosphere was absolutely electric. You had to think on your feet, not sort of, and look, I go along with it. Oh, great one, long live the king and all this business, you know, I'm doing this in the constituency. That wasn't the case of Prime Minister's question.
Do you think, David, and I've introduced actually a private member's bill to go back to having two Prime Minister's questions, I think Tuesday and Thursday for half the time. Do you think that also brought the Prime Minister more involved with Parliament? Because he can't just sat out one day a week.
Completely. Now, Peter, they hate it. They don't want to be scrutinised. But it wasn't just making a grand entry in the tea room saying, oh, the PPS coming in and plonk yourself next to the Prime Minister and tell the Prime Minister how wonderful you are. I mean, what is the point of that? It was actually keeping them in touch. And although things didn't go at the well with Margaret at the end, you know, the health and all the rest of it, my goodness, she was absolutely in touch. So yes, if it was up to me, Angela, I'd go back to a Tuesday and a Thursday. The other thing I have to say, Peter, the big change, and don't take offence at this, Angela, because I know everyone thinks they're working terribly hard on their emails, you know, responding to 38 degrees and all of that. But we worked Monday to Friday and the chamber was at the centre of it all, including a Friday. And okay, we worked until the wee hours of the morning, and I know no one wants to go back to all that. But when you summed up a debate, a minister couldn't get away with, you know, half the rubbish that the civil servants had given them to read out. They responded to the debate properly, and people stood up and intervened. And they'd go back into their office and say, oh my goodness, the mood of the House wasn't great. Perhaps we need to rethink what we're doing, and they would change it in the House of Lords. That was the whole point of having the House of Lords, not just to rubber stamp things and to stick two fingers up to them, but to be a proper revising chamber. And I do think, Peter, that the quality of our legislation was so much better when we had a proper, fully functioning chamber. And so I think also, Peter, it meant that colleagues, when they became members of Parliament, felt really pleased with themselves. They achieved something. I got onto the statute book, 10-minute rule bills, private members rules. It can all be done now, but I think Angela's intake, I could be wrong completely because I didn't have an induction course. They were taken up to the vote office, not just with the table office, to meet the clerks, have private chats with them and learn and understand how you don't have to be a member of the government, because we can't all be in government, to get things on the statute book and make a real difference to people. So before I shut up, Peter, I think that the way things are now, it's meant that ordinary members of Parliament, they've sort of been quietened and slapped down, and I want to hear all their voices, because I know, Angela, that there are great characters within your intake, but because it's been such a rotten Parliament, we just haven't heard your voices really. And if you are put in a position whereby the people opposite can intervene in your speeches, can challenge you, or it will make you better parliamentarians.
Oh, quite right. I couldn't agree with you more. I think you've only heard us in 3-minute segments since we joined, whereas my understanding is some speeches, you know, on a Friday they can go for hours, but you know, they go for a lot longer. Well, I know we're sort of moving on from the subject. One of the things that we got accused of as being part of the Westminster bubble, and so it's interesting you talking about going back to 2 p.m. queues. And just some of the changes that feel like we've lost some of the traditions, but at the same time we're accused of wanting everything to be about Westminster and to be in that bubble and not be in our constituencies and not standing up there and getting the clip that we can put on social media. So it's quite difficult to balance those two things. But one of the things I wanted to ask you about, which was interesting in your book, was, you know, what do you think the benefits are of having a career before you become a member of Parliament. I mean, we do have parliamentarians who have only ever been involved in the world of politics and have only ever been in Westminster. One of the advantages for those people when they're newly elected is they know how the system works and they know where to go straight away. When you've had a life outside of Westminster and you've had nothing to do with politics like me, that process takes a lot longer. You know, you're meant to be a quick study in order to get this job. But, you know, what are your thoughts on, you know, where people come from in order to do this job, and maybe some of your experiences before you became a politician?
Yeah, and Angela, to get back to the PM's questions Tuesday and Thursday, I'll be frank with you, all constituents want to come up to PM's questions. How stupid that they only gave us one chance a week when we used to have 2 chances a week. Also, Angela, you can still do your constituency stuff because we started every day at 2:30. That was the whole purpose. It allowed ministers to get out to constituents, and with travel as it is now, you can move to the Midlands and the North fairly quickly, but it was still possible to do all the constituency stuff and give a good account of yourself in politics. Your background, Angela, I salute. A working mother with 3 teenage children who had a pressurized job. I mean, you were sort of being a little too humble, saying that you didn't go to university, as I understood it. Well, you did graduate in the University of Life. Common sense, living real things. And I'm sorry, Angela, it's not quite as bad as it was, but we did have too many people who had only ever done politics, run ministers' offices. In any case, if I was running the minister's office, I wouldn't allow their minister to get into all the trouble that they endlessly seem to get into, frankly. So I don't think they're doing a brilliant job of looking after the back, because, you know, it's when you've got a family and all of that, of course, you understand the challenges that life throws up. So I think that it makes you a better rounded politician if you've had a real job beforehand, if you worried about hanging on to your job, if you're worried about how to make ends meet, if you've worried about getting to work on time, relationships with bosses, whoever that might be. And we used to have many, many more people who had what I call a proper job than we have in recent times. Although, you see, Angela, we used to have lots of military people. Now, I haven't got a military background. You've only got to look at my shoes to see that I haven't got a military background. But they brought different skills. They used to run the whip's office and they were rather good at it. So I'm sort of pleased that we've got a few more military people now, but let's have more people with a professional background like yourself and Peter. It's all very well working in a minister's office, etc., but it's quite narrow, really. And I think it doesn't help when you formulate policy, frankly, because lots of the policies that I see coming through, I think, well, where's the common sense in all that? It isn't going to work. And what does it bring to the table? So yes, Angela, I want to see more people like yourself. Also, Peter, I don't think we should be ageist. Has everyone got to be terribly young when they become a parliamentarian? Why can't we have it all? You know, I'm only halfway through my parliamentary career. Ladies and gentlemen, do not worry. I'm only joking. But I do think it's good to have older people. When I ran an employment agency, part of which was called Success After 60. Well, if we're all living longer, what is the point of living longer unless you're doing things, etc.? We don't always want to slump on the sofa watching daytime TV. And I think a bit of wisdom, which is why I have to say, Angela and Peter, I much regret that so many parliamentarians chuck it in quickly. We had far too many Peter leave because of the row about what people were claiming and not claiming. You know, a third of parliamentarians left. We lost all their experience. And what worries me, you see, Peter, we've got so many new MPs. Well, they've got nothing to judge it by, really. You know, and I think we really need a good mix. And yes, Angela, more people like yourself. It would certainly help the Treasury, wouldn't it, Peter?
Yeah, absolutely. Interesting. I think you said Angela didn't go to university. I didn't go to university. I went straight from Westcliff High School to take my articles in chartered accountancy in Southend. But I certainly, when I arrived in 2005, there was this youth idea that, you know, everyone had to be young and you know, not have any experience. I think we need a balance, and I do think there has been in the past, previous to the current Prime Minister, this sort of ageism. I felt that very strongly when David Cameron was Prime Minister. I thought we were going down the wrong route. Then I thought we were going down the wrong route on a number of things when David was Prime Minister, of course, including Brexit. But I do think...
Would you agree, though, that David, and I know there are some difficulties now, and you and I were dead against the coalition, would you agree, though, that he did perform well in a full House of Commons? He was good at the dispatch box, and he did actually, Angela, make mincemeat of the opposition.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. But of course, I had the benefit of seeing someone even better in Tony Blair. I mean, he was just incredible at the dispatch box, and I only actually called him out once. And you know, David Cameron was very good, but he wasn't of that that standard. And we've drifted away from Parliament towards government making decisions behind closed doors. And
Peter, you and I aren't going to fall out, but I will never forgive Bambi for his lie at the dispatch box about weapons of mass destruction. I had no military expertise, but I went to the House of Commons, Angela, and I was going to vote against it because common sense told me there was no exit strategy. I stood there, I listened to him telling the House of Commons that these weapons will reach us within 10 minutes. And I can never, never forgive him for that, Peter. I know he's going through a rehabilitation process at the moment, keep popping up about coronavirus. But Peter, remember, I remember everything and I do hold grudges.
Well, you're right to do that. I mean, that was before my time. I wasn't in the House and I was on the outside, and I thought, well, if the Prime Minister is saying that, he knows something that we don't know. And no British Prime Minister would lie on something as important than that. Yeah. And of course, it transpires him and Alistair Campbell were doing exactly that. And you're absolutely... I wasn't commenting on... I mean, I disagree with Mr. Blair on so many different things.
I'm only winding you up, Peter. He was... Yeah, I'm winding you up. He was an absolutely dominant figure in the House of Commons. I mean, Angela... When he announced that he was going and the spat between him and Gordon was awful, David was doing this to get us to stand up and applaud him when he made his last speech. And as you know, you're not allowed to applaud in the House of Commons. That's always a tradition. I, Peter, and a hard little group, we did not stand up and we did not applaud him.
Well, I think that was right, because that's not what we did. It was a strange occurrence. It was. I think happily I was at the back, so it didn't make that much difference. Not everyone stood, and but it was a strange thing to do, and it was out of tradition, and it wasn't necessary. And but now we've got the... Particularly now we've got the SNP in Parliament, we've got them clapping during debates. I mean,
well, you can point people out in the public gallery. You couldn't do any of this, Angela. You couldn't refer to anyone other than in the chamber. And so even the language sort of has changed completely. And I bet some of the viewers are thinking, God, he's so old fashioned, living in the past, etc. But if a tradition by definition is good, why do away with it? And I think the language we use, you know, referring to each other by their constituency, is all these things are important. Now, look, I'm enjoying this so much. We could go on for another hour, but I think I can only let you, I know we're going to end up with the charities, but before we come to the charities, one last question, Angela.
Okay, well, being from the other side of the world, I was quite interested in the fact that you're chairing so many APPGs, all-party parliamentary groups. You're the chairman for the Maldives, Bermuda, Qatar, and the Philippines. And I'm sure you've been involved for many years. And one of the great things about being on an APPG is being able to go and visit those countries as well. But is there one particular APPG that sort of stands out to you out of those ones? And are you concerned about some of the things that are happening in those countries, you know, for those people? And do you feel that there's anything that you've been able to make a difference with being the chairman of any of those APPGs in terms of the things we're doing in the government in this country?
Brilliant question, Angela, because what would you say if I told you in the Olympic Games, for the first time ever, Bermuda has won a gold medal, the Philippines has won a gold medal, Qatar has won a gold medal. All for the first time, they've all won medals for the first time. And I'm glad you raised
how wonderful.
because for the viewers of this video, some people think, oh, MPs traveling the world at our expense, it's wrong. That is ridiculous. We are national and international politicians. And you learn so much by traveling to all these countries. And I do encourage some of your newer colleagues, Angela, because they're worried that if they go abroad, it'll make the local papers and destroy their career. If you declare it, it's so important, these bonds and ties between other countries. So I'm in love with the Philippines. What would we do in our hospitals and our care homes without the Filipinos? Absolutely wonderful, devoted people. The Maldives, yeah, in one sense it is paradise, all these little islands, but they face tremendous challenges, frankly, in terms of education and healthcare generally. So I work very, very closely with them. Bermuda, it is paradise, pink sand and all of that. But you know, Angela, from your professional background, that their main industry is sort of in investment and insurance, and they've had a very tough time as well. Qatar, without going into all the difficulties in the Middle East, I told the Emir, listen to me, I told the Emir, but I did tell the Emir, when they won the World Cup, I thought, this is crazy. How can you have football, 40, 45 degrees, it's too hot. Having been out there now and seen the preparations for the World Cup, absolutely marvellous. And they are good, kind people who are investing in our country, if you like, in a clean way, with clean money. And I absolutely salute them. But I think, Angela, in all the challenges I've seen, when you go to India and you go out onto the streets at night and you see, I mean, we all think of Slumdog Millionaires in Mumbai, and you look everywhere and you think, oh my goodness, what can we do to help? So Mother Teresa, I always say I've only met 3 saints in life. Mother Teresa, oh no, 4. Mother Teresa, Princess Diana, my mother, and although she's not here at the moment, my wife. But I think India, the challenges there. But I would just say, Angela, that you coming from New Zealand, again, that's wonderful. You can bring such a perspective. And I think, isn't there a New Zealand lady on the opposite benches as well?
There are 2 Australians. So we've got, yes, so we've got...
Put the foot in it, Peter.
David.
We've got a New Zealander on our benches as well. So Sir Paul Beresford and I have adjoining constituencies, and we're both from New Zealand. And I'm actually seeing him later this evening, which is lovely. But we do an SNP Australian and a Labour Australian, 2 ladies.
Well, I always say to Paul, one of the 2 most revolting things in healthcare is doing people's feet and doing people's mouths, as he did as a dentist. But let's not go there. Peter, one last question before we get on to the charities from you.
Well, let me start by saying with the APPGs, David, you're absolutely right how important. I used to chair the APPG against human trafficking, and I visited the Philippines because, believe it or not, they dealt with the victims of human trafficking better than we did in this country. And many of the things that they did, we adopted into our Modern Slavery Act. There's still one thing I'm campaigning for to get them to change in this country, which would be what they do in the Philippines. So you're right about how important it is, those visits. But I suppose if I'm talking about campaigning, there can only be one question to you, David, is Southend-on-Sea going to become a city?
Right, wonderful. Okay. I'm putting my hand in my pocket for the Southend-on-Sea makes it a city face mask, but I haven't got it in my pocket at the moment. Right. I'm going to share this with the viewers. I can't make the bid in person. The local authority has to make the bid. So I said, it isn't Conservative control, Peter, at the moment.
Oh.
It's a hung council. We're too short. So it is Labour-led with independents and Liberals. I've had a meeting with the Labour leader who said initially he was against it, but he's chatted to the Labour leader of Brighton Council, who I think is in the Lords, who's told him it's a really good idea, a no-brainer. So he's personally in favour of it. I'm waiting to hear back from the council. Because, Angela, can you imagine if there has to be a vote on it? A vote on it is crazy. Peter, it should be a city. Yeah. We walk on water in Southend, don't we? With the longest pier.
Yeah.
We've got the greatest gift with the Thames estuary. We've got singers, dancers, sculptors. We've beautiful parks, really high standards in education. And of course, Essex University have now got a facility here. So when Boris Johnson, Angela, became our leader, the first opportunity, I've got it in Hansard, I asked him on the floor of the House, would Southend-on-Sea become a city? He said yes.
Oh.
Now, he doesn't tell lies. I'm going to hold him to it. But I do need, Peter, the local authority, to trigger things. So I'm hoping and praying at the moment. Now, Angela, I think you wanted to ask me about the charity.
I do. Absolutely thrilled. Not only are you the chair of the APPG, but you are raising money and supporting for Endometriosis UK. I think you will have noticed, like myself, that the government is quite keen on pushing forward a strategy for women's health, to give some of the difficult health problems that women go through a little bit more spotlight, and for us to talk about them, but also to put in real practical measures. And you know, as I was looking at it, I saw the average diagnosis time is 8 years in this country, and that you've got a mission to try and get it down to 4 years by 2025, which I think is fantastic. So, you know, what can you tell us about the work that you've been doing for Endometriosis UK?
Angela, thank you for sharing that with our viewers. I've got a wife, I've got a son and 4 daughters. I had never heard of endometriosis. And going back to what Peter said at the start about being an MP, you should be people orientated. A constituent came to see me at one of my regular surgeries called Carla Cressy, very beautiful, but behind that beauty, she was just torn apart with what endometriosis was actually doing to her body. She's had endless surgery. And so she got me on the mission. We've got great support among our all-party parliamentary group, with some of our parliamentarians admitting to the fact that they suffer from endometriosis. Really glad that Nadine Dorries has now put it into the government programme. And now we are fully engaged with making sure that ladies waiting for surgery, it's speeded up, making sure that much is done to help them with their mental well-being. And fingers crossed that one day there will be a cure to stop the cells reproducing themselves in such a way. But thank you, Angela, for drawing that to our attention. And Peter, I think you had a particular charity you wanted to home in on.
Well, I'd encourage everyone to buy the book, Eyes and Ears, I spelled AYES, Survivor's Guide to Westminster Briefing. I mean, it's worth reading because of all David's experience, but also because the profits are going to 3 charities. And the one I wanted to talk about, the Music Man Project, is close to home because my sister, who lives in Leigh-on-Sea, daughter is part of that project. It is a most remarkable thing that it does for young people with disabilities, including they had a wonderful concert at the Albert Hall. So, David, you have been such a supporter of the Music Man Project. I wonder if you could just say a few more words about it for the viewers.
Angela and Peter, when I first became an MP, I was taken to a mental health centre in South Ockenden, and I saw people in straitjackets. I thought that was the norm. And these were people with learning difficulties. Well, fast forwarding it, this wonderful constituent called David Stanley and his lovely wife, who is a member of the Salvation Army, they held 2 senior teaching positions in our secondary school and found that through the power of music, they could transform the lives of these people with learning difficulties. Now, if you've got someone with learning difficulties, and we think of particularly severe cases, I know that mums and dads worry about when they die, what's going to happen to their children. Well, through the Music Man Project, it's just a tearjerker. We've been to the London Palladium. I did my Bruce Forsyth performance rather badly. We then, as Peter's told you, viewers, we went to the Royal Albert Hall. And Angela, if it hadn't been for the coronavirus pandemic, we would have gone across the big pond and we'd be going to Broadway and also playing at Carnegie Hall. That is going to happen. Peter, you wouldn't know this, but what I'm so thrilled about, David Stanley, the local founder, has just been made on a voluntary basis a government advisor for people with learning difficulties. And what he's going to do, Angela, he's going to spread this throughout the country. He's already been abroad with the project and taken it to on an international basis, but he's going to make sure that all our constituencies benefit from the power of music. And it's just wonderful. I mean, even the most severe ones who have to wear these crash helmets, etc., he can get them to do the triangle, and it just gives them so much pleasure. So thank you, Peter, for drawing that to our attention. And the final charity is prostate. A local constituent came to me and said, look, David, we chaps aren't so good for looking after our own health. Get your PSA test. And he was diagnosed with prostate cancer, and through gene therapy, he managed to overcome that particular health issue. So, look, ladies and gentlemen, Not one star is born, 2 stars have been born with Angela and Peter today. And I'm going to say that their constituents are so fortunate and blessed to have them as their members of Parliament. Angela, you're going to turn your marginal seat into a solid Conservative seat. Why? Because you care about people. You're a people person, and your constituents are going to learn that over the years and decades to come. Peter, you are a legend in your own lifetime. You're a proper politician and a national figure. And that is why you do so well at every general election. You've worked your way through the party. And I know I speak for many other colleagues in that I really do admire you. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you, the audience, for spending time with us today. I want to thank my 2 colleagues, Angela and Peter. Now, please go out and buy the book. I don't know if I told you what the title is. Eyes and Ears, A Survivor's Guide to Westminster. Thank you all so much for viewing this video. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. This is my journey so far. Where I was born, where I became a councillor, when I was first elected to Parliament, and where I am now the Member of Parliament for. Enjoy my journey.
I hope you enjoy reading my book, Eyes and Ears, A Survivor's Guide to Westminster.